Welcome, everyone. Grand Gnosis Master Dr. Thor Templar here, and we're going to cover the Necronomicon and H.P. Lovecraft magic. Now, this has been around for a long time, and I've talked about this somewhat in the past, and it keeps rearing its ugly head. Now, Necronomicon, which was a very popular paperback book throughout the 80s and 90s and is still for sale out there, and gained great popularity mostly because of its low cost. It was always difficult to find occult books in general, and this was one that was published and was available in your average bookstore rack for $3 or $4. So this made it very interesting and accessible by the general public. Other books were difficult to locate, weren't easily gotten, so you couldn't walk into your average store and grab them. So this caught on, and the book by Simon is the one we're talking about, was very well written, put together well by a top publisher. I think Avon published it, the same person that published the Satanic Bible, etc., which also was readily available. People then misunderstood, as they continue to do, what H.P. Lovecraft was all about and his horror writings, which if horror is quite different than occult writings. Horror books or Frankenstein or Friday the 13th, Jason type. These are horror movies. They're not really based in anything occult whatsoever. They're strictly and totally based in horror. And that's what H.P. Lovecraft wrote about. Apparently Lovecraft, who wasn't very successful himself and quite an odd character, gained great popularity in recent times and is well read by lots of these horror fantasy comic book people. What few people don't seem to understand this fact is that he was not an occultist in any way whatsoever. He was an anti-occultist, believed it was all nonsense and garbage, wrote a book about that for his buddy Houdini. Yes, him and Houdini were working together, and this book would have been published. It must be somewhere to be accessed out there. But at the time, Houdini died, and the book never went anywhere. But it was written by Lovecraft, talking about the silliness of occultism, magic, and everything to go with that. So, this kind of information is very important for you to understand that any magical system accredited to him is complete and total lie and bogus. Now, whether you like his writings or not, I don't really find them very attractive. Building a magical system out of this would be considered chaos magic, meaning making something from nothing. The Necronomicon, based on Simon, is completely and totally bogus. Now, there does seem to be a Necronomicon of ancient grimoires by John Dee, the famous magician. So that seems to be floating around, at least that name seems to be floating around. Using that terminology, it just makes things confusing. But for years, people have used this inexpensive book claiming they've gotten great results. Well, that's because they're focusing their energies, as any visualization focusing on a chaos-type magic plan will work for you. If you just sit there and think, make something come to me, well, nothing's going to happen. If you put together a formalized form of doing this, then you are able to create things as any type of visualization would be doing. Now, in terms of these actual entities being alive or anything else or real, well, they're like any other spirit forms, and if enough people believe in them, a certain amount of manifestation is going to happen. And a bunch of kids have been using these systems and immature people for many years. A matter of fact, I was the first person to publish an alternative Necronomicon talking about the original Simon book and how to use it better. I also published a couple other small little booklets on the Necronomicon as well in the 90s. I was the first person to do that because there was just fantastic interest in it. Everybody had this book, everybody was using it, and many people were claiming results from it. Well, in the past, I thought these results may have been real, but when you look into so many people and what they claim to do, things get very foggy after that. It comes down to the point of what is their success or not, and it's very difficult to track magical people and magical success. For many, many reasons. And occultists, like the entire population, tend to be very delusional to think that this $3 book is giving them great results. And the price really doesn't matter, but you got to remember this was a mass marketable book by Simon. He followed up with another book, and they're both very well written. And if you want to do fake, bogus magic and empower it because it's based on a comic book horror magazine written by H.P. Lovecraft, you certainly can do that. Just remember that this is not whatever a valid system means, but you got to understand where this comes from. Now, whether there are energies drawn to these particular sigils, whether because H.P. Lovecraft channeled in something, well, this could very well be. And, all magic comes down to this pseudo system of belief and empowerment of whether it works for you. We go back to all the ancient societies who used magic, and they were all conquered. Well, where were the gods? Where were the magic? So what is magic? What is not? But, I prefer to use things that are more rooted in cultural things. Egyptian magic, Aztec magic, runic magic. Well, these seem to be rooted in a tradition and connected to powerful sorcerers and witches of their time. There were no powerful witches and sorcerers practicing Lovecraft's books. This is all new. There are authors now coming out writing more and more on this, claiming all sorts of things, and all it is fantasy. There is nothing to it. People claim they're connecting these spirits, getting these things from them, mostly doing it. You got to be a very low level to keep writing about this something. You're flogging a dead horse here. This system has never proven to be very effective for anybody. Those who have claimed results and everything else, as I stated, are difficult to confirm, and generally this stopped as soon as other magical books were available to people and they could do more, better, powerful, valid systems. This is a complete made-up system. This is nothing more, and the people that get involved in these things tend to be the typical chaos satanic magicians that believe in nothing. But there should be a basis to your belief system, even if it's contrived in fantasy, like religions and so many other systems. Complete bogus fantasy religions are, but billions believe in it. There's a structure to it, and there's an energy to take from it and use. This is true with the Lovecraft system as well. So many people believe this nonsense and have been empowering it that there is a certain amount of energy there. I don't believe there's a lot, but the point is that it is connected to a certain energy. When someone makes a sigil of a particular Lovecraftian god form that has a particular value or use, you're creating a thought form energy that is then attached to that. So there certainly isn't anything wrong with using this magic, while it is generally low level, and I frankly doubt that you can expand upon it into other areas and make up more and more fables like so many people are doing out there. Is not the best way to go. There are more powerful systems to be used out there. Should you use these? Should you use the sigils in your magical practices? Well, why not? They're hooked up to a particular energy. Just like any other symbol, you're buying on what has been put into that particular sigil to empower it that you then can access through your rituals. Well, there certainly is enough people who've bought the Necronomicon book. I'm assuming the paperback has sold hundreds of thousands of copies over the years. It's also, as the Satanic Bible, it's one of the most copied and pirated books out there. You can find it just about anywhere, and you can find many volumes of it. People have made $1,000 volumes in leather out of this and everything else. So it is everywhere. Now, here again, it is not an ancient text. H.P. Lovecraft was not connected to anything from what I can see. Whether he channeled a certain amount of entities in his horror books is very, very questionable. You could do the same thing with Frankenstein. Frankenstein was a particular entity, and you could say that if you use Frankenstein, that you'll get that type of energy. But of course, he was not a powerful spiritual figure. He was basically just a monster of sorts, a clonish freak. So there really isn't much power there. Unlike Lovecraft, who went into this complicated system. Now, Lovecraft, from what we can tell, never had any occult contact with anybody or even read occult books. He did read fantasy books and for a period of time had access to a large library containing mythology and other things that a relative owned. But Lovecraft in himself considered all magic to be horrible. He was buddies with Houdini. Does anybody get that? So the point is that he created this system, and you could say, well, the system is different than the creator, and this is true to a large degree. You know, where do you separate the channel from the channeled information? This is always difficult. Where does this come from? What do you do? It's a difficult area. Like most forms of magic and pretty much everything in life, if you believe it works for you and you can then follow that up past belief into actual proof that things have changed in your life, that you've manifested from these actual spirits, then it's just as good as any other system out there. But the Necronomicon is bogus. H.P. Lovecraft was an anti-occultist, and people need to get that in their head.